Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to another fine episode of 15-Minute Free Thinking. This is perhaps episode 102 or 3, I'm not sure. However, I'm also making a companion video version to this one because I think it's important on both fronts. And I don't think I'll be covering anything that's too controversial, but let's just say talking shit about any type of music or any industry, of course, comes with pushback from people who, let's just say, are ardent supporters of anything that makes money. And money is always at the forefront of these decisions. It gets pretty absurd when people are making money off of violence. And I'm going to get to that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I do have a few bones to pick and a few points to make. First of all, this podcast is sponsored by nature, nothing more. I'm sitting out here. It's raining for the first time in a couple weeks. It's been hot. It's a beautiful day. And all of my videos are sponsor free, ad free. So if you'd like to contribute in any way, hit me up. There's ways to do that. And also, if you're new to the channels, check out the podcast, 15-Minute Free Thinking, or the Carpo719 YouTube channel. So, moving forward with the discussion about rap and hip-hop and how it turned to complete shit. Now, let me just say it started out pretty shitty as well. You can't deny that a lot of those early rap songs are pretty bad. And I see the irony here. This is a discussion I've been wanting to have for a long time, being a middle-aged white guy talking about rap, but I've been listening to rap for 35 years. It doesn't matter what color your skin is or how old you are, but I was exposed to NWA when they came out. I was listening to that album when I was 9 years old, playing Zelda on Nintendo. I have been fascinated with beats, hip-hop, techno, even as it moved into that, morphed into kind of that anything that has electronic sounds, in other words, I don't shy away from. But also, the lyrics, the meaning behind some of these rap lyrics are strong. And let me say, today's rap and hip-hop, what is popular, is shit, in my opinion. Garbage. And I'm not going to say it was better in the past, because the rap that was popular back then, a lot of it was also shit. And much of the good stuff, the real underground hip-hop, the real rappers that actually made an impact, did so behind closed doors and behind the scenes. I'm not going to name names because that just gets into a very personal territory when people are like, oh, well, this guy sucks and these guys are great. Let me just say that in the 80s there was plenty of bad rap. I did love NWA, although all they sang about was the same shit I'm complaining about right now. They were talking about shooting people and robbing shit and looting. Look, this is the problem we have because young people today listen to hip hop and rap, a lot of them, and it was the same in the past. It's not something that, old guys sit back and listen to. Not yet, and of course this will change as people who grew up with rap get old, but the point is that young people are very influenced by what they hear people say is important. And in the 80s, the hope from a lot of rappers, especially coming out of Grandmaster Flash when he released The Message, which was a relatively long rap song, and I'm sure you've all probably heard it. It starts off with the lyrics, it's like a jungle out there. Sometimes it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. And the whole song is about not a jungle out there, it's a jungle sometimes. Anyway, out of context, the whole song is about not falling for the urban jungle myth where you need to go out and do harm to other people in order to make ends meet. But here's where it gets funny. Not funny, but ridiculous. The idea that a lot of folks say they wanted to get out of the ghetto and they did good for themselves, and then instead of going back and donating to their community or helping out those in who they say have been affected in their communities, they go out and they buy a bunch of flashy shit and sports cars and the gold chain thing. Oh my God, in the 80s it was so bad. But let me start from the beginning here, because this might take a minute. We're failing our young men, and we're allowing industries to support and prop up this kind of crap, and it is our fault because we are the end consumers. And I try to listen to new rap. I try to branch out. And, you know, when you have videos of a guy pointing a gun right at the camera and they think they're cool, there's something wrong with what's going on. Can you imagine if those young men pulled out a saw and pointed that at the camera and started rapping about being carpenters? It's not very glamorous, is it? However, you would never see a documentary or a interview with a carpenter who said, yeah, I was tired of, you know, being an idiot. I decided to go out and be a gangster and rob and steal instead. No, it's the other way around. It's ex-gangsters and ex-thieves trying to help rehabilitate people and to help other youth before they go down that path. And I know, I sound like the old guy screaming at the kids, but I was a kid. In fact, I was influenced at one point in my teen years to where I was hanging out with a couple of people who associated with Crips, considered themselves Crips, and convinced me to dress up in all blue and go down with them to Portland. And yes, I got chased by a gang of like 8 to 10 Bloods that were chasing us through the streets, and we got buzzed into a random apartment building and they came up slamming on the door trying to get in. It's something I just remembered. It was the stupidest thing ever. This idea of division and class warfare within the communities that people are trying to get away from. And yes, it is predominantly black people. It's not something we need to shy away from, but plenty of white people as well. Young hoodlums that just want a way out. And like I said, you could learn a trade, but if you're not influenced to learn a trade by the people you admire and look up to, then why would you bother? And there are lots of rappers out there and artists who talk about improving yourself through learning skills and taking the time to educate. But, you know, sadly enough, humans in general, and especially men, are most likely to use violence as a means when they have no other option. And most shootings and robberies are done by young men. Most likely to be violent are men. And marginalizing the emotional needs of men, which is something that's been pretty popular recently, these are the future leaders, and you're marginalizing their opinion. You're marginalizing who they are and oversimplifying that men just need to either, quote, man up, or men need to be, you know, peaceful and not be violent. Look, the reality is that we have some anger within us. We all have a little frustration sometimes. You're not going to get away from that. We need to release it somehow. You can do that constructively. But with a gun? Is that a way to deal with problems? When young men feel ignored, then lashing out is a way to get attention, because negativity bias is something inherent within humans. It's because we wanted to see the danger. I think that it's something that is primal, that comes with us through our evolution, that at one time we were better off seeing something as scary and being safe than getting eaten. It's a pretty simple concept. Therefore, we're going to react to things that we feel a threat. And if people make you think that your neighbor is a threat and that you need to arm yourself against him, then you'll turn firearms into something more important than power tools or skills. The irony here is that there are people who know how to use a gun so well and go out and spend a lot of time learning and training, going out on the range, and never end up having to use it. Yet those same people refuse to pick up a handsaw and do a little bit of construction and learn how to do something that actually makes them feel good inside long term. And one of the most difficult aspects of this is that young men are very vulnerable to falling prey to these bullshit fake gurus, financial gurus especially. You know, I have to cringe when I hear people talk about investments and portfolios and Bitcoin and everything else. It's not because I don't think people can make money on these things. That's not the point. You can make money going to Vegas. There are a lot of ways to make money. But honestly, the way that feels the most satisfying to me is just to work for my money. Sure, I'd like to get ahead. I'd love to have a few $1 million in the bank. But when you try to convince millions of young men to try this one approach, you end up with shit like FTX. Guys like Sam Bankman-Fried, who just a year ago was called on mainstream media, on the news, the most generous billionaire on earth. Well, now he's broke and going to prison. The point is that when our leaders, the people we look up to, turn out to not be what we thought they were, you know, then it can be very depressing for people, to say the least. But this is off topic. I apologize for moving into talking about FTX and currency. But the point is that there are gurus everywhere, and gurus also fall into the musical realm. So we have a person could make the argument that the Grateful Dead also talked about these things, and that young people went to their concerts. They had songs on their Western type, you know, tunes about, you know, I shot him dead, or me and my uncle. He shot his uncle at the end of the song. But these are things that can be translated and understood as folk songs, and a lot of the time, cautionary tales. And I want to make this very clear before I forget. Cautionary tales can often be misunderstood. Back in the 80s, I was also into heavy metal a lot. And I had a mullet, and I went to, you know, I had my Slayer and Metallica shirts, and I went to see Iron Maiden and Anthrax, and I overkill. Got my shirt sliced by some dude with a knife in the show, like weird shit, you know, like a kind of a violent atmosphere, but also a lot of people just used it to kind of release their thoughts. The point I wanted to make was, back in the 80s, during that era, there was the satanic panic. And I remember my parents talking about the exact same thing, saying, you know, that we should be, you know, you can't even hear what they're saying. Heavy metal, you can't even hear their lyrics. It's just, you know, garbled. And I was like, no, you can hear it. You've just got to listen. But whenever the media would take clips, it would be of some horrible part about Satan or whatnot, but totally taken out of context. What I found when I listened to, say, Megadeth, was they were talking about anti-war, anti-nuclear, disarmament, and being peaceful, but through a heavy metal, you know, method. A lot of rappers and a lot of, you know, musicians in every genre will make a song ironically in first person. Follow me? So they become the person and they say, I went out and did this and I killed this person, but they never really did. It's obviously just a song that's meant to put themselves in the place of somebody who did something, and a cautionary tale to not do that. So the entire song might sound like the person's a horrible person, and then at the very end they tell you what they really are, you know. I'm trying to think of the Rolling Stones has a great song about that. I'll let you leave it in the comments. You tell me what it is. So, moving on here. People use desires and attention in order to get money, and there's a vast cycle there. And when you can point a Tech 9 at the screen and, you know, act like you're badass and show you all your braces, you know, that's going to influence young people, however you look at it. But it's not done ironically, like I was talking about. These are people who actually try to convince their audience that's how they are. And that's pretty fucked up, in my opinion. But let's just say I haven't even mentioned the drugs aspect. A lot of rappers used to talk about smoking a lot of weed. Oh, sure, that's not a good inspiration for the kids either. But what are they talking about now? Xanax. You know, rappers that base their whole video on using Xanax, a pharmaceutical, of course, it kicks your ass. Everybody loves Xanax, but it's horrible. It's horrible shit. And lean, which is, I believe, codeine and cough syrup. So here we have them taking opiates and anxiolytics as if they're candy and making videos talking about it. Then they're out driving and doing other things. Kids watch this shit. And damn it if I don't sound like the old man screaming at the sky again, but, you know, being a man may be subjective, but it's also, there are certain principles that I think we all have to uphold. And one of those is a nonviolent attitude towards other people who mean us no harm. Therefore, when they talk about robberies, and they talk about, you know, how, well, I've got to get mine, that kind of shit pisses me off. Look, I even listened to Too Short. My God, Too Short is one of the shittiest rappers alive. He always was. He sucks. He's dumb as dirt. But I still listen to it because I like the beats. And I even like the way he rhymes. But yeah, me and my bitches, it's just the same old crap. I can't even. But look, I've been an Eminem fan for a long time. Some of his shit makes me cringe. Some of it makes me laugh. Some of it makes me cry. Lately, the only rapper I've been listening to is Prof. And he's a white guy from Minnesota with a mustache. And honestly, my buddy sent me a link to buy a record because it was a limited edition signed record, because I collect LPs. So he said, I know you've never heard of this guy, but check it out. I ended up listening to it and loving it, and I bought all his LPs now. And the guy personally responds to comments still, and he's just blowing up. And the thing is, a lot of his songs are very violent and very offensive. But if you listen closer, you'll see a lot of it's kind of this, you know, putting yourself in the first person of somebody else's situation, even if that's a fictional character. So, to summarize and to finalize this, rappers of today, a lot of them, and a lot of hip-hop artists in the mainstream are total fucking hypocrites. They talk about wanting to get out of the game. They talk about wanting to get out of the ghetto, but then they end up staying in it, but just with a lot more money. I should say, in the violent aspect of it. Like you say you want to get away from the violence and how you grew up in a violent household, but then you're still promoting violence. Total hypocrisy. The other aspect is, another aspect, one of them, the many, is that they put their peers down as broke ass, I can't say the word, Niggaz. Can you spell it out? You know, like, yeah, somebody else is broke, so what? Why do you make fun of people for being poor? You know, like, you gotta hustle. It's like, okay, you got lucky. You had a rap label. And if they are playing a game, which a lot of them are, you know, playing a role, then that's even worse, because you know what you're doing to people. Not just your community, but all communities. Because music is an expression of art. It's an expression of who we are. And often the worst part of it is they leave the communities behind that they said they respected. So, you know, I want to finalize this with the biggest aspect that I think I haven't mentioned, which is flexing. This idea of presenting wealth and status, or I should say, presenting wealth as status, and then, which it is for some people, and then status and clout as some sort of an achievement. Think of the person that gets famous just for being famous. Or think of the artist or the rapper who got famous through a friend of theirs who was a rapper, who brought them on, and they're not that good, but they get famous and they get signed and they make millions of dollars, and then people say, well, this guy's a genius, you know? But you find out all his songs are written by someone else. He can't mix his own beats. He's pretty much incompetent. People look up to these people who flex their wealth as if they earned it. But often, that's not the case. I don't think people really deserve, you know, I'm not saying they don't deserve the money they earn. The system is what it is. But they don't deserve to take, I guess, you know, take credit for where they got as hard work when they're not working hard. I don't think a lot of famous people even know what it would mean to work a hard day. They're just often like politicians. And many of them, yes, are just playing a game. They didn't come out of the ghetto. They've never shot any Uzis. They sit there and they pose, and 15-year-olds eat that shit up. And a whole new generation of insolent fuckers, comes up. So what do? I say that it's on the artists themselves to be aware, but it's also on the consumer to educate each other and not let your kids fall prey. And this is not the same as the, quote, satanic panic, as I mentioned, of the 80s. The reason I made that comparison was because, look, during the satanic panic, your kid might end up wearing a Slayer shirt or going to a rock concert. But these days, the stakes are much higher. You might just end up shooting somebody or harming yourself in some way. Because it's a big difference between talking about a gunfight in the Wild West and smoking pot to going out with an Uzi and blasting a bunch of people and taking Xanax. And so these people should be ashamed of themselves. They disgust me, and I just wanted to get that off my chest. So I think I've covered everything. Thanks for listening. As I said before, you can check out the podcast, you can check out the channel. Hopefully the links are in the description. I try to be organized, but I'm really not. But it is what it is. If you all want to hear something more about any other different genre, because I like them all, let me know. But rap is something that I wanted to get into a little deeper. I didn't want to get specific lyrics thrown at you. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. And if you don't, you don't. And that's just how it goes. So I'm going to finish the podcast version, and, I'm going to turn them both off. So thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time. Peace and love. Over and out. Carpo. Peace.